Welcome everyone. We're going to get started. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lori Donahue, and I'm honored to be the president of the school board here. And thank you all for coming. I know this is a very difficult topic, boundaries, and it brings out lots of emotion, and we understand and we appreciate your energy. So tonight, I'm going to start out, I was asked to talk a bit about why we're looking at boundaries. And I think many of you, I've written a lot of email responses, so hopefully a lot of people understand that our issue starts with a primary issue is at the north end of our district, primarily, we have overcrowding. And at the south end, we have underutilization. So we have schools that range from 100% capacity to 35% capacity. And that's a problem. So people say, well, how did we get here? It's been a problem for quite a while. And if you look at some of the properties in the area, especially on the north side, they were originally zoned commercial. But despite objections from us in many cases, they were converted to residential. We don't get a veto vote with those kind of conversions, but we do make comments about whether or not we can accommodate these new subdivisions. So what happened is when these subdivisions came in, the local neighborhood schools in many cases couldn't support these students because they were already at capacity. So we're shipping them all over the place. So we have very convoluted bus routes, like all over, students from up in north going down to the south, and we need to address that. And then last year, with the pandemic, we tried extremely hard to get our students in. But when you have to have 6 feet of distance and you have schools that are at 100% capacity, guess what? It's a problem, and it's one that we couldn't solve. So we're here today to say that we do need to address this problem. It is not getting better. It would be way easier for us to step back and just let it ride and put Band-Aids on the situation like we've been doing, but we can't do that. We have a goal to reduce our class sizes across our entire district. And this year, we did take some of our federal funding we got from the pandemic, and we did apply it to our kindergarten through second graders and worked on reducing those class sizes. But to go further, we need to have space in our buildings. I mean, all of our buildings. So that's why we're looking at this. I'll leave you with 2 things. One is that you have a very dedicated board who will deliberately and carefully study the proposals that we get before making our decision in January. And second, I want everyone to remember that we are very fortunate to live in a top-notch district. All our schools are excellent, and our board will make sure that that continues to be the case. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Talley to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. And I want to say thank you to all of you who showed up tonight. I really have appreciated your passion, your interest, your engagement throughout this process. And I want to start by talking first about the committee who has been part of this process from the very beginning. Back in May, we sent out an email. We put it on our website. We mentioned this at a board meeting, that we were asking for volunteers to participate on the committee member list. On May 8th, the day that this happened, May 18th, we had more than 20 people who signed up immediately for that committee list, and more than 250 people signed up for this voluntary activity. From that time period, they have been meeting roughly every 2 weeks in the summer, in the fall, and up until now. And most of them have attended every single meeting. And I just want to say how much I am appreciative of our committee members. They are made up of parents only, or committee members. They are not made up of any administration, any board member. And I really want to thank them for being present, participating, using their experience as parents in the community, being engaged, asking thoughtful questions, and pushing the process forward. And for that, again, I am very thankful for what they have done. Second, I want to share that doing a thorough boundary process is a difficult process. It was possible that we could have done just an elementary one, just a middle school, focused just on one part of the district as opposed to the whole system. But as Ms. Donahue mentioned, this was work that needed to be done. This was work that we wanted to make sure it would last for a period of time. And so that is why we looked at a systemic approach to our boundaries as opposed to a school-by-school approach or looking at a geographic approach to our boundaries. It was important that we looked at the whole school system to deal with the issues that Ms. Donahue was talking about. Balancing our schools, dealing with the fact that we have some buildings that are underutilized and some that are overutilized. All of that had to be examined going forward, and that is what the Boundary Committee did. And then third, I want to talk just a little bit about our enrollment. One of the things I don't think we have done is been very overt in sharing our enrollment over our actual enrollment, and I want to share that with you. Every year, September 30th is the official enrollment of a school district. It has been that way here in Illinois. It's that way when my other districts in Virginia and in Maryland. And so on September 30th, our enrollment was 25,805, which was 254 students lower than last year. Our highest enrollment was in the 2008-2009 school year of 29,570. We are 3,700 lower than our highest enrollment. The average every year of what we have continued to drop is about 280 students. And I mentioned that last year this year compared to last year, we're 254. This will continue for Indian Prairie. Our enrollment continues to drop just like it does across the whole state. The state average is roughly 1.5% dropping every year and has been for several years. Other districts around us, when I talk to the superintendents, their enrollment continues to drop just like ours. It's actually a topic of conversation among the superintendents as we continue to think about where are these students going across the state as they are moving. So it is not just Indian Prairie, it is within this district. Finally, I want to reiterate that the Board of Education will make the final decision. What you have seen so far have been concepts. These concepts are not etched in marble. As I have said before, they are barely etched in jello, and we continue to make changes to them. Your input, as Ms. Donahue mentioned, we read each and every email that comes to us, hundreds of them, and we do see and hear what you're saying, but the Board of Ed will make the final decision on this, even when the proposals are given to them. I want to end by saying that we are committed to ensuring that the best is for our children. We are concerned about our children's mental health. We are concerned about their academic success, hence the reason why we are looking at all of this. We know that the last couple of years have been difficult. We have all been part of that. So none of us are foreign to the fact that we have done a lot and our children have gone through a lot. This boundary study, no matter how it finally turns out, will prepare us for the future. And so I want to thank you, and now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schwartz, who is from RSP Associates.
Good evening. Good? I think that mic's on. All right, good evening. Glad that we have a great, let me move this mic. How about now? All right, good. You got my mic on. Perfect. All right, so what you see behind me is the format that we're running for this evening to be able to get your inputs. We started a little bit late, but I have my colleagues in front of me making sure I stick to just 20 minutes. I have a lot of information to cover that will give you some context of the information that you can get on the website, the things that have been occurring in each of the 7 committee meetings thus far. We do have some. All right, if you can advance me, because for whatever reason our clicker's not working. There we go. All right. So some of our goals for how we get your feedback is going to be the exact same thing that we've done with the committee in the last 7 meetings. We do want to hear what your thoughts are. Again, this is something that's unique and new and maybe different for a lot of you in how you are maybe thinking boundaries might look in the future or how you might be impacted. And so as I go through the next few pages, I want you to understand how we've gotten to this point with what's being discussed in Concept 1 and Concept 3. And why is there not a Concept 2? How did that all happen? All right, so a little background to RSP, because I think there's been some questions that have come in through the emails to the district. We've been working with school districts for 19 years in these type of issues, with enrollment analysis, boundary analysis, capacity analysis, facility master planning, all of these things to help the district make the best planning decisions. Tonight I have a retired superintendent, Dr. Wilkerson, here on the front row. He'll be assisting in the conversations that happen at the MAPS. We also have one of our planners, Jenna Wallace. So again, we are glad here to be with you this evening. This process started back in April of 2021. And this is with the Board of Education where we set the framework. You've hopefully gone out to the website and seen this visual to understand that it's taking many different pieces to get to the point of the board making a decision in January of 2022. Probably one of the more needed moments in the process is occurring tonight, Tuesday and Wednesday. The exact same information, the exact same format is going to occur at each of the high schools. And the color code on this particular graphic illustrates who's responsible for what and how we move our way through the process. Again, go back to the information out on the website. You can read more about that. We did have guiding principles that provides the framework for the committee in their examination of any of the concepts that have been created to this point. Again, this is the framework. Things are changing a little bit as we're on this journey together, but in general, you can see how some of these elements tie in to make and continue the excellence that's in the district. Also in April, we had the Board of Education prioritize boundary criteria. We had 10 different criteria. They're all important. They're all a part of how we look at each of these concepts, but they prioritize that when we're looking at any changes to the boundaries to focus on demographic considerations. We show you a lot of different variables to get at that. Neighborhoods intact. We may talk about that in the question and answer session about what is a neighborhood, but then they also wanted to minimize any dollars that are spent on brick and mortar and they wanted to make sure the enrollment balances out to the utilization in buildings. You've heard from Dr. Talley that we do have challenges with enrollment. I'll talk more about that here in a couple slides. Wrapped around this framework, wrapped around these criteria, is this ACE concept. This is really what we're hearing tonight and the next 2 nights. It's more of the qualitative approach to the things that you perceive are valuable to why you like your kids going to the buildings that they are, the grade configurations, all of that type of information. You can see those 3 pillars are broken with academics, cultural, and economics. So these are some values that we have in how all of this works. So as I look into how did we get here, there's several things that started out. And the first is, if I go back and just talk about elementary enrollment, in 2010 and 11, there was 12,881 elementary students. Here in the 21-22 school year, we're down to 10,340 students. That's a decline of almost 20% in that time period. We have over 14,500 student capacity at the elementary level. What this means is district-wide, elementary speaking, we're less than 75% utilization. What's unique is we have some buildings that are over 90%, 95%, and we have other buildings with their utilization where they're like 35% or 40%. So again, just giving you some perspective of what we're looking at with enrollments and the number of students that could be served. The bulk of that change where we've seen decreases, we'll show you in some visuals, has happened on the south side of our district, specifically south of 34 Highway. We've categorized this concept 1, concept 3 with some of these 4 challenges. We have new developments, and these new, bless you, and these new developments right now are, for the most part, unassigned to any elementary, middle school, or high school. We currently have boundary islands. That has been the establishment for how we've been able to move enrollment to buildings that can accommodate those students in those new developments. I've already suggested and stated to you we have a declining enrollments, and when we look at our projections, you'll see that that continues. And that impacts us with how we utilize our buildings, how programs are in different buildings and not in other buildings. We've been continually updating the development that happens in the district, and as it comes across things that maybe are going to be 55 plus developments, so age 55 or older, or as new developments come online, this is always changing as we get information either from the cities and villages or from the school district, as those developers have to go through a process that involves the school district signing off on those developments. We also are showing you some visuals. Always go back to these maps. There's so much that I can talk about. If we go to the current elementary boundaries, we currently have 26 islands. If we go to the current middle school, there's 4 islands. If we go to the high school, there's 2 more islands. When I look at this from a feeder perspective, what you're seeing up here on the screen, you can see dotted lines are where we have those broken feeders currently as they go from elementary to middle school and then middle school to high school. At the elementary, Brookdale, Kendall, Owen, Peterson, Steck, and Young are broken. At the middle school, we have Crone, Skolin, and Still. Some people have asked information about the modeling. I wish I could speak to that just like 30 minutes minimum. There's a lot of statistical analysis that goes into what we do to understand what that impact is on many different levels in the understanding of how that creates our boundaries. I am giving you a visual of that enrollment by grade so you can see how we have larger grades graduating, smaller incoming kindergarten classes. This is part of our challenge as we've talked to the committee about the birth rates declining, population declining, all these things impacting our enrollments. This visual here shows you the past enrollments and where we're headed over the next 5 years. And we're going to decline at the elementary level by about 400 students over the next 5 years, 300 students at the middle school, and about 700 students at the high school as these smaller grades work their way through the system. We also are showing you the level of accuracy at this level that we've had in our forecast from last year to this year, 99.99%. That all helps us to be able to understand where the boundaries are going. We've also given a forecast by building, and there's so much information on here. Basically focus on orange areas were over 95% utilized. Gray areas were under 75%. When we look at just the current boundaries, 10 of the 11 elementary buildings will operate under 75% utilizations, and there's 4 to 5 that will be under 60% utilized. We'll talk about in the question and answers more about capacity. When we look at the high school, again, the same illustration of where we are and where we're headed. You can see Matea is overutilized, and that is creating some challenges with how that programming works in that building. We also are aware that with NEQA, we have the freshman center, so it makes it look like it can serve more students. If we're thinking about the end with this declining enrollments, how does that look as we compare the 3 high schools in future years? I also had Jenna put together a really interesting graphic to give you an understanding of where buildings are and how it relates to enrollments. And what we're able to see here is we've broken 59 highway to be an east-west and 34 highway to be the north-south to create these 4 quadrants. You can see the impact of this on this table. Quadrant 4, the southeast quadrant, has seen the greatest amount of decline. Again, I wanted to leave you a visual of where facilities are, where kids are. This is part of our challenge as we work our way through developing what this may look like. We've had a lot of conversation about capacity. Again, in the questions and answers, we'll talk more about this because it requires a greater understanding to where the committee is on what capacity means. But we have a current capacity, and then we have an innovation capacity. This innovation capacity came out of the conversations of not feeling comfortable with this nearly 5,000 available district-wide elementary seats available. If we are not going to look at closing and repurposing, is there another way that we can reimagine what capacity could mean to this district and how it relates to keeping the inventory as we currently have it? So we'll talk more about that. We have a lot of conversation, obviously, when we get into underutilization of buildings and what that might mean for repurposing or closing. And this is not an easy situation. I know the committee has been challenged by this. If you follow what's been happening in the committees, we're split on which of the 2 concepts are maybe the best way to move forward with resolving some of our challenges at each of the levels. This is precisely why we've been trying to reimagine how does capacity look different. Are there things that we've learned through this COVID 18 months that helps us maybe think about buildings differently? Your board president has already indicated that we know it's been a challenge on you and our staff, and so are there different things that we can do to accommodate what capacity means rather than just looking at it from a number perspective? We have a lot of different things that established Concept 1 and Concept 3. So Concept 1 came out of really trying to solve some of the underutilization on the south side with closing and repurposing of buildings. This didn't start right at the beginning. This really began in Meeting 3. Meeting 1 and Meeting 2, we were talking about how are we keeping all this inventory, but it became apparent we have this 5,000 available seats at the elementary level. And so as we started to look at the conversation of buildings that might be repurposed or going offline, the conversation is, well, which buildings are they? And so we have suggested in each of our meetings that when we look at repurposing or closing, there's going to be more study than just coming out and saying, hey, it's one building versus another building. In the process of how we got to making the decision for what this would look like with less capacity on the south side, we took 2 of the smaller buildings on the south side and said, hey, if those go offline, they're repurposed for something else, look, we still have available capacity on the south side to do different things, still be able to educate all of the students on the south side. Other things that came out of this were reducing islands, assigning areas that are currently not assigned into an elementary, a middle school, and a high school. Again, you're going to see so much information. There's stuff on the maps. I don't have time to go over all the tables, but you're going to see all the information. We're trying to give you as much information to be able to give us some feedback that ties back to the guiding principles the board gave us and the prioritized boundary criteria. And you'll see different things that relates to the demographics, the housing type, things with ethnicity. I want to kind of get up my way, work my way all the way over to we even have students impacted by the boundary change if it goes into effect in 22, 23. What is happening with growth areas. We even show how far you are from buildings. There's the growth areas. What that feeder looks like. And again, sometimes things may look really nice in a visual, but in reality of how you see it practiced, maybe it's not so nice. Or maybe we have different things occurring. So for instance, when I go back to that feeder, with concept 1, we've reduced the number of breaks from elementary to middle, and everybody completely goes from middle school to high school. And we try to bring everything back to the guiding principles, boundary criteria. All of this is information that you've seen if you go out and look at that information on the websites. We get to concept 3. So concept 3, this came about, as I was telling you, when we were looking at capacity. Can we look at things differently, and can we equitably put those innovation spaces throughout the district, not just where there's space on the south side? By making space in the northern schools where we're already challenged with having the right amount of capacity, that naturally means we have less core classrooms that can be utilized for core K-5 instruction, which means we have a boundary area that would have to shrink to accommodate having a smaller capacity to have those type of spaces in that building. Again, we've designated with the school district 1 to 3 classes, depending on the building. Again, you'll see all of the information. I'm trying to help you guys work your way through what does this mean with data if you're a data person, but then there's the reality of what does this all mean, whether it's closing and repurposing or a boundary change. They all have some different impact on how we feel about what those changes look like. All right, I'm going to move my way through because I was given about 3 minutes. Again, here you can see what that feeder diagram is. I want to go to the last few things because you can go out and look at all this information. What our team has put together with administration is a way in which we can get information from you over the next 3 nights, so tonight and the next 2 nights. So there will be a QR code on each of the maps. And if you're not familiar already with QR codes from going into restaurants, it'll pull up a link. You'll be able to click into it, and you'll get access to this Metro survey. And we've used this tool to be able to understand what some of your thoughts are. Click through this. There's different bubbles, and wherever you see dots, you can get additional information before you actually select things to rate something or give an actual comments to what this might mean. We want you to use this. We do, if you're not wanting to use technology, we do have paper copies here tonight that you can fill out and give to administration. This is really the best tool because we'll have a lot of the analytics and be able to categorize all your comments in a way that we can give some additional feedback to the committee. Again, here's just another visual of how you're going to work your way through this. Again, it's not going to be a perfect survey for some of you, and that's why we've tried to give some possibilities for you to write some of your comments in there. So again, there's this QR code. You're always able to the district website. That will also give you access into this survey and your ability to, again, give us feedback. I think now we're moving into the point where you as a group can go out to the maps. We have, I believe, 30 minutes for you to reconvene, talk to each other, hear what other people's thoughts are. At each of these stations, we have administrators, we have committee members. Again, their goal is not to convince you that one concept is better than the other or that they like or dislike something. They're there to hear what your thoughts are in person. That's why we've set this meeting up. That's why if you go back to April of 2021, when we worked with administration, when we worked with the Board of Education, our goal was to create something that when we got to November 8th, 9th, and 10th, we'd be able to get some sort of good feedback from the community on where you feel things are headed and does it make sense with where our data is leading us. So with that, I think I'll release you all to be able to go out into the hallway, look at those maps. At 30 minutes, we'll start to usher you back in, and that's where you'll be able to give your comments for signing up, and we'll give further instruction when you come back. But thank you.
Thank you for coming back in. What we're going to do for the next maximum of 30 minutes, maybe sooner if we can accomplish answering some of the questions that we've received to this point. We want to leave you with some information because maybe many of you have similar questions. So I'm going to kick this off with one that we've been hearing a lot. Where do we go from tonight? Where do we go from any inputs that we hear tomorrow and Wednesday? So I mentioned that we have this QR code to be able to submit your comments through this survey. There's also going to be a link that's out on the website where you'll be able to type your address in and see where you currently go and where you would go under Concept 1 and Concept 3. So what we're going to be doing is taking all of your conversation that you submit, whether it's tonight in writing or through this Metro survey or through the emails, we'll try to integrate that into how do we make any changes from Concept 1, Concept 3, or does something grow out of what we see in Concept 1 and Concept 3? What I am going to tell you is we're not guaranteeing that things change radically where every one of you like whatever that output looks like. We know there's changes with how we look at the timing of when we address underutilization and how soon we have to address buildings that are at 90% or greater utilization. So that's kind of the process of what we've been looking at with our timeline. Our next committee meeting is December 8th, I believe. So that's going to be where the committee starts to understand what does this all mean from your inputs. I don't know if the other mics there are live. I know another question that we've gotten quite a bit about is with grandfathering or student options or timing of when things may happen, whether it's an elementary student, a middle school student, or a high school student. So I'm going to send that over to Dr. Talley to be able to talk about grandfathering and student options.
I apologize. I was looking through, I think, probably 20 pages of questions and trying to figure out some that we can answer. So grandfathering. In most districts, when there is boundaries being done, and we have done this here in Indian Prairie in the past when we opened Matia, we have allowed for grandfathering to happen. We talk with the board, we share a plan. Grandfathering can look in many different ways. It could include allowing, for example, all students who are finishing their terminal grade at their school, 5th, 8th, and 12th, to stay at their building. Also, grandfathering can be expanded to include any students who might be rising juniors or seniors in a building, Or it could include those who are, as I mentioned, finishing their terminal grade at that school level and siblings for that child. Grandfathering sometimes allows for transportation to be provided by the district, and other times it's a responsibility of the parent. What will happen when the boundaries are put into proposals to the board, administration will recommend some possible ways of doing grandfathering, and then the board will make a decision on that going forward.
Great. And another question that we've gotten quite a bit about is related to capacity in innovation spaces and related to two parts to this. Why would we create innovation spaces, and do we really have money to create those spaces? So either Matt or Dr. Talley?
So I'll start very simply by saying innovation spaces do not have to be that elaborate. When I think about them, they could be as simple as having a STEM lab in each of our elementary schools. We currently spend approximately $400,000 to $500,000 a year on our STEM school, and we know that that will be coming to an end at the end of this school year, and that money could then be used instead to outfit the STEM labs. Also, our schools currently have STEM equipment in their schools, and so we would be augmenting what's already there and putting that in the STEM lab. Another innovation space is to have a PTA office in every school. When I was a principal, I happened to have a place for my PTA president to do her work in the building. It's not something we have, but that is something to support the collaboration between our PTAs and our schools. So those are examples of innovation space, but there could be more that we could do as we look at more elaborate opportunities as well.
And Matt, do you want to speak to the dollar question? Because I know that was one of our criteria, not to increase that.
Sure. I do think Dr. Talley already mentioned, but when the decision was made to close the STEM school, and that was a decision made by 3 of our partner districts, the administration and the board made a commitment to using those funds to provide STEM education to all our students. So this would be an opportunity to fulfill that promise. As Dr. Talley said, we think that that money would be sufficient to get us up and running with STEM rooms in all of our buildings if there's space available.
Great. And another question that we've gotten quite a bit about is, what is the plan for Wheatland and Indian Plains? We've had some of that conversation at the committee level. And I'll speak a little bit, and maybe Matt will step in. Initially in these concepts, we've, with the available capacity in other buildings, we feel that those programs in those spaces could be infused in one of the other buildings.
Just a brief overview for the community who may not be familiar with those 2 buildings. Indian Plains and Wheatland represent 2 of our oldest buildings in the district. Indian Plains is kind of kitty quarter from Mattia up in the northwest area of the district, and Wheatland is at 103rd and Route 59 down in the southwest corner of the district. Those buildings have not been a permanent enrollment center for any students in several years. We have been running the alternative high school out of Wheatland the past several years, and before that it was run out of Indian Plains. If there is space for that program at either one of our general high schools or potentially another building, that would be a potential opportunity for a property that the district could look to close. And I'd say the same thing about Indian Plains, that Indian Plains has now gone several years without housing students. It is parts of the facility are over 100 years old. Right now we're really just using it for storage. So depending on what's decided as part of this committee and as part of our strategic plan that follows it, we could be in a position to look to permanently offload those 2 buildings. They have been held by the district in case they're needed in the future, and if we get some clarity that they are not, we could look to sell or permanently close those facilities.
All right, another question that we have received quite a bit on is if a building was to be repurposed or closed, what would that timing look like?
The repurposing doesn't happen overnight. It is actually a process to look at what are the multiple options that can be done. Repurposing could include, for example, putting in preschool programs in a building. It could be that we would make it a center for professional development. Currently, in Indian Prairie, the only place we really do professional development is in central office using the boardroom. And so those rooms can be double booked at times, and so that's another purpose. It could be that the place would be repurposed in the sense of being sold, but all of those things would take time. It doesn't happen overnight. That if the board were to decide that we will repurpose this building, then we have to determine what are the processes, what would be the use of that space.
All right, another question that we've gotten quite a bit to is with, again, closing and repurposing, is there any specific buildings or metrics that might go into determining, is it the buildings that have been discussed to this point, or is it something different? And that might tie into, are there other plans that we're working on, such as the strategic plan, that may influence how we look at buildings? So toss that back over to the district on that.
So it is correct, we are going to be working on a strategic plan starting in late January. That plan may help us to determine how exactly we would use some of our buildings based upon the input of the community in the creation of that 5-year strategic plan. I think another thing that we have to consider is everything related to what are the needs in the school system based upon that.
And then the last question I had on my list, and I'll open up if you guys had some others, is there the possibility that there is a different concept that could evolve out of the conversation that takes place tonight, Tuesday, and Wednesday night? And I think I started to answer that earlier. Absolutely. Again, we're going to tie this all back to those guiding principles, the boundary criteria, and then some of those 4 larger areas that we told you that we need to address in each of those plans. So there could be changes quite a bit to what we've already presented for these next 3 nights. Are there other questions that you saw on your list there, Dr. Talley and Matt?
Oh, we have a couple. Rob, the first question that's been that's come up several times and was discussed at last week's board meeting is some of the new development, and specifically the development in the Bolingbrook area, the Sawgrass Phase 1, Sawgrass Phase 2 developments. Can you just talk about how that has evolved a little bit and what's included in today's presentations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll see if I can go to a page that'll kind of address some of this. So as I mentioned, developments have been evolving in many different places in the district, but with Sawgrass in particular, there's been conversation about expediting what may happen in Sawgrass. So what I'm showing you on this particular page is the current potential for Sawgrass. So if we go down, let me see where I have this. I think it's Sawgrass single family. Phase 1, we have 216 units. There is a Phase 2 that I think brings another 51 single family and I think 216 townhomes, something like that. So we've planned for that in what we're seeing for growth in that particular area that will impact right now the Bilta elementary attendance area. But again, this is something with all the developments. Every year we're always trying to monitor where are they at, and in the scheme of with the cities and villages, and then also with the conversations with the school district.
was one question about, with the removal of 2 elementary schools in Concept 1, what is the proposed plan to control classroom size? Ms. Donahue spoke about this in her opening remarks. I just want to remind everyone, there is roughly 15,000 spaces for children in elementary schools, in our current elementary schools. We currently have a little more than 10,000 elementary children in our schools. Therefore, it is possible, again, I'm underlining the word possible, I'm not saying it's happening, it is possible that you can do both, address class sizes with the closure of schools. I don't want people to think that it cannot be done. It is something that I knew when I came to the district, that I wanted to reduce class sizes. I was very happy that we had the federal money to start the process with K2. And the goal is to continue that even after the federal money has disappeared, because I've talked to Mr. Shipley about this, making sure it stays in our budget. And then how do we expand it all the way up is the other piece that I have been very careful about as well. So this is a goal that the board also has with regards to reducing class sizes, because we know it makes a difference.
I'll just add there are 2 components to the class size discussion, and the first is facilities and making sure that there's sufficient facility space. But the second is a operating budget and personnel discussion too. And so we are in a position right now where we maybe have the facility space, and as we mentioned, depending on how we look at some of the concepts, we have plenty of facility space to reduce class sizes. Where the issue is right now is on the operating budget and making sure that we have the budget to ultimately hire more teachers and get that done. And we are working towards it. I think our board has prioritized it, and we've made good progress at reducing class sizes over the last several years. But we know, and the board knows, that we're not where we want to be on that specific front yet.
We've heard from about 40 speakers tonight. I want to thank all of you for speaking, for sharing your thoughts. I remind everyone that through your emails to the board, they are read by each and every board member. I read them all that come through as well. Through public comments that were given also at the board meetings, that those are other ways by which you can share your thoughts. Also, the survey tonight is the other method by which you should do and provide your survey pieces. Any final comments from Bob? Ms. Donahue? We will have another forum tomorrow night, and then the third one will be on Wednesday night. I want to thank all of you for attending and for participating in this tonight. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.